All right, everybody. Well, welcome. Thank you so much for joining today. Um, Thanks for joining today and attending the DataBytes session around accessing reports and dashboards. I've got a pretty tight presentation today, just as a reorientation and hopefully a reminder to everybody about how to go about accessing things. There's been some changes over the last 6 months or so with how we've got everything configured in the background. There's been a lot of communications that have kind of come and gone. And so we just wanted to take an opportunity to make sure that we're all on the same page. Everybody feels comfortable accessing different things that the Institutional Research Office puts out, and address any sort of questions that folks might have about getting access to different reports or dashboards that you might need to do your job. So, a little bit of an agenda. I want to give a brief overview of my team. I know new people are always coming and going from Rio, so just making sure everybody's familiar with the team, what we do, who we are. Um, Refresher on how to get into Tableau dashboards and what all is in there and available for you as a user, as well as some of the business intelligence, aka Power BI reports that you might have bookmarked or access to that you might utilize in your role. And then orientation to just some other resources that we have. For instance, our Google site that's got kind of links to everything that we produce and lots of good stuff on there. So just a brief reintroduction if you're not already familiar with the Institutional Research Office. I have the pleasure of serving alongside 6 other colleagues in the team, all with different kind of specializations and service areas that they support. Everybody on the team is cross-trained in a sense that they've got some familiarity with what's going on in different areas of the department, but there are certainly a lot of specialization amongst everybody as well. So all that to say is please don't hesitate to reach out to anyone that you see here if you ever have any questions about how to get access to something or just curious about some information that you'd like to get your hands on. Chances are that we can get you supported in one way or the other or work with one another to figure something out for you. So lots of different things going on, lots of different areas of support that we offer to the college. And so the way that that kind of looks in practice is that we think about kind of 3 different pockets of services that we provide. Traditionally, a lot of the institutional research work is in support of a lot of our academic processes and planning activities. We do a lot to support our faculty in terms of monitoring program health and enrollment trends. We do a lot to support the college in terms of strategic planning in support of Dr. Koh's work and the Strategic Alignment Committee. Of course, a lot of surveys and focus groups and trying to better understand stakeholder sentiment, whether that's employees, students, the community, and our favorite, compliance and mandatory reporting. Lots of things that we just have to do, right, to make sure that we're checking boxes, keeping the doors open, and ensuring the different external stakeholders have the information that they need about the college and our students to meet some of those requirements. Outside of that kind of scope, we've also got some business intelligence functions that we support. A number of years ago, the business intelligence team, which was at the time a part of IS, migrated into the IR team. We found that we were doing a lot of overlapping work, serving a lot of customers in similar ways, and so it made a lot of sense to combine those 2 teams into one so that we can kind of maximize our capacity within that space. Within kind of that realm of BI, we do a lot of automation work and extracting data from different systems. You all are very familiar with Rio's mix of enterprise platforms that we've customized and developed along the way. And so moving data between all those things, making sure that we can leverage data from one system and kind of blend it with data from another is a lot of the work that that team is doing. There's also a lot of operational reporting that's developed within kind of the BI function, thinking about how we can identify students who might be hitting certain indicators, making sure that we supply rosters of students for different kind of compliance purposes and things like that. We are also doing a lot in data modeling and warehousing. A number of years ago, back when BI was still part of the Information Services Division, there was a dedicated data warehouse that was maintained and it supported a lot of the reporting that we've done. As we moved away from that, we're starting to rethink about how we can reincorporate some of that practice so that we can streamline and create efficiencies within our team. And so that's really going to be a lot of the work that we're doing over the next year, is thinking through some of the goals and priorities we have around that, and trying to take some of the work off of our plates while also making sure that you all have access to much more stable and quickly served up data on your end. And then the other area of work that we're starting to get into and dabbling around in is in machine learning and more kind of artificial intelligence analytics, if you will. So for some time, we've had some machine learning models that we've been maintaining, looking at students' engagement with our various systems, how they're performing in their courses, and trying to predict how likely they are to be successful in one capacity or the other. That work is not going anywhere, and if anything, we're starting to look at how we might expand it, not just within predictive modeling, but also thinking through, are there ways that we can leverage AI to try and support your all's needs as end users, thinking through how can we create, our own type of chat bot so that you can ask it common questions about, data. If I want to know how many degrees and certificates were awarded last year, having a resource that you can turn to for that, rather than having to go and source it directly from a reporter dashboard or put in a request. So just starting to kind of scratch the surface on that, but certainly an exciting frontier that we're looking to explore. We've got a ton of resources, as you might imagine, probably an overwhelming amount. And so we try and do our best to keep it all very much organized. We've got a dedicated Google site that serves as a bit of a link farm and links out to different things that we produce and publish. So we'll look at that in a little bit at the end of the presentation. We do formally receive requests most of the time through help desk tickets. There is a dedicated menu of options within the Rio-specific service desk application. We're not quite in team dynamics yet, but there's a few different options that you can pick from, whether it's requesting access to something that might be locked down or have provision rights in there, development of new reports or dashboards, or access to survey data or requesting a new survey to be run. There's different options that you can select from there. I always like to say when I'm speaking on this that I don't want the help desk ticket to be a barrier for you to reach out. So we're always available for questions and IMs and things like that. And if we need to escalate something to the level of asking you to submit a request, we'll kind of orient you toward that. So don't let that be a barrier. Feel free to let us know what you're thinking, and we can work together on whatever you might be interested in. I also just like to take an opportunity to call out some of our data literacy initiatives. You're engaging in one of them right now. We try and host a monthly kind of lunch and learn session just to share a little bit about what we're doing, any recent developments that we might have achieved, and then engage in some dialogue around how you might take an opportunity to use some of that in your day-to-day role. We also post a newsletter once a semester, again, just kind of as a ledger of all the different things that we might have updated or produced. We try and provide a little bit of insight into what's going on within the higher education sector. We kind of have a lot of intersection with strategic planning and enrollment management and things like that. And so want to kind of keep our finger on the pulse of what's going on in the broader space so that we can make sure that as a college, we are ready to respond to challenges and innovations where they might arise. Okay, so looking at then resources that you can access for yourself, we recently developed a Google site. It's probably a year and a half old at this point. Historically, we leveraged the employee portal a lot for things, but Google Site has given us a lot more flexibility in terms of how we can present the information, different things that we can link, and different options that we have available, like using things like Google Forms to collect feedback on things or ideas that people might have about different projects. I'm going to take us on a detour here for just a second so you can see what that looks like. There is a friendly URL that you might have noticed on the slides here. learn@rio.com/Rio Data. That'll take you here. And within here, you can get access to a variety of things that we're producing and maintaining. For instance, links to the Tableau dashboards and to the Tableau server. You can see our kind of legacy employee portal site that still has a lot of great content that's been archived there for historical purposes. Links to the Power BI reports that we'll look at together here in just a bit. a couple links that will take you directly to the help desk ticket. We've got kind of a Google form about, if you have an idea for something that's not currently in existence in our resources, we can take in requests through that avenue, as well as links to different other things that we're affiliated with on the public website, our newsletter, and some of the recordings from these sessions. This probably needs a little bit of a retooling, but links to very popular dashboards we monitor as part of our WIG to influence user activity and adoption of different things. And so, we kind of curate a list of the things that we know are most commonly referenced within our catalog and, items that we might want to drive some additional traffic to, just to ensure that folks are keeping tabs on what's going on with the college and how different data points are trending. So lots of great stuff on here. If you've not already visited, highly encourage you to do so. There's probably more things here than you realize were there, and a lot of great historical documentation that we've developed over the years and just kind of store and archive and keep track of in case we ever need them. So things like, fact sheets from 10 years ago or different things that we put together for compliance needs or whatever. Lots of great write-ups on the site. Kind of taking us back into the presentation, I wanted to give a rundown of how to go about navigating Tableau, making sure that you can access as a user, you understand what is and isn't in there, how to go about getting in there, some tips and tricks that you might employ as an end user to make the most of the functionality. And then a little bit of a tour of some of the most commonly referenced dashboards, so you can, maybe monitor some of these things on your own in all the spare time that I'm sure you all have. So by way of orientation, Tableau is the official resource for Maricopa in terms of data visualization and dashboards. Some time ago, depending on how long you've been here, you might recall that we previously utilized Microsoft Power BI for a lot of our dashboard work. We've since transitioned all of that into Tableau. So anything that was in Power BI before now lives in Tableau, and everything is single sign-on, which was the big benefit, as well as some of the licensing that we saved in moving to the district's version of Tableau server. So the benefits are, single sign-on, chances are you're going to be prompted through Duo to multi-factor auth to get in there. There's a lot of really cool tips and tricks and features that exist within the Tableau server environment that you can take advantage of. And so I'll show you some of those things within Tableau so that we can kind of take a peek at that, and feel free to follow along on your end if you're interested. So just a common way that you might navigate to Tableau is to access Rio's dashboards through the Google site. That'll take you hopefully right to Rio's college-specific project folder within the district's Tableau server. This is the same Tableau environment where all of the other 9 colleges plus the district office will develop and publish content to. So if you've never been in here before and you were to just navigate to something like your home screen, there's a little bit of an orientation that needs to happen so that you know where to get to. If you click on this Explore menu, you'll be able to see all the different spaces within the Tableau server where content might live. And so then intuitively, if you go into the college folders and then to the RSC folder, you'll see all of our content. Quickly, before we start moving on too much further, this is one of the things that I wanted to first highlight is, as a user, you can start to favorite different items that are in the Tableau server so that you don't have to go through this reorientation every single time. So if you notice, when I come over to my favorites menu, I've already got some things saved that, I either have favorited for the need for presentation purposes, or because I just want to be able to get there much quicker. So favoriting something like the RSC college folder is a quick shortcut for you to be able to get right there. And then once you're in there, there's a variety of different kind of subfolders within our project that we leverage to publish content and make sure that it's kind of themed in ways that hopefully are intuitive for you as a user to get to what you're looking for. We take a lot of care when we're publishing things to really leverage things like keywords so that if you want to search for something, you can do so. But keep in mind that because all 10 colleges in the district office are publishing content into here, there's tons and tons of stuff. So just searching for keywords oftentimes will return a lot of results that, you might not be looking for. If, for instance, it's, Chandler Gilbert's annual awards dashboard and you want Rio's, there's a little bit of customization you can do with leveraging those favorites to kind of clue in on what you're looking for. So let's look at a couple of common dashboards, things that I know are heavily utilized in the usage information, and then we can, take a peek at some of the functionality within that. So the first thing that I'll kind of direct everybody to is something that is very popular in the usage data is our weekly enrollment dashboard suite. We have a different version of this for every semester type. So there's a fall version, a spring version, and a summer version. So keep in mind that detail as you might be looking for something like this and monitoring our enrollment trends. The purpose of these dashboards is for us to monitor week over week how we're trending in terms of our current enrollment for whatever semester we're in. So right now we're in, of course, the spring 2026 semester. This dashboard allows us to gain some kind of point in time insight into how our enrollment is evolving this semester compared to the last 2 years of spring semesters. So within this, we get some kind of nice summary statistics looking at how many unique students we have this year compared to last, with a nice little percentage increase or decrease depending on where things are at. And then some nice trend lines and lots of filtering options, as you'll always find on Tableau dashboards. The benefit of things being in here as opposed to some of our legacy business intelligence reports is it really gives you a lot of control as a user to filter and slice and dice the data as needed. Just looking at the folks who are on the call, there's a lot of different interests that are reflected in our attendance list today. And so, depending on what type of student population you most closely work with or what different things that you're most interested in about the college's student body, you're able to really drill down on that level of specificity with a lot of these filtering options that you have available. Some different things in here, just by way of tips and tricks that you might take advantage of is one thing that we try and incorporate are kind of space saving techniques that we'll use to pack in more information than creating different views of data. So rather than having different views for something like headcount or credit hours, we try and build in these parameter controls here so you can look at something like a spring headcount trend line, but then if you want to look at credit hours, you're able to do that. You'll see this same functionality reflected in a lot of the dashboards that we publish, both as a space saving tool, but also knowing that, folks want to be able to track different things, especially in light of changes to the budget model and how we're tracking some of those key metrics that are most important for us. Something that we also recently just added is the ability to kind of view the data along the block calendar structure. So what this allows you to do is, trying to get a sense of where pockets of students are starting, so that we can understand how our enrollment evolves over time and how it's kind of distributed across the 16 different start dates that occur in any given semester. And so within this, you can kind of then see, based on the week of the term, how many students are slated to be in a class that begins during that week, so that you can, make plans based on your role and how your office might be engaging with some of this work to better understand what that all looks like. One of the interesting questions that's come out since we first published this view is, why is it that week 5 looks so high? Anecdotally, a lot of people know that many of our students start in week 1, and so it creates a little bit of cognitive dissonance for people when they first start to see this. And so really it all comes down to just the students that are included in this data set and where they tend to engage. So if you use something like our modality filter here and look at just online courses, then the chart gets distributed much more closely to what folks probably think is the truth, where most of our students are starting in the online population within the first week of the semester. We've got another kind of peak right there at the midpoint where Flex 2 would kind of kick off and mirrors what you would typically expect to see. But if you want to look at something like dual enrollment, then you kind of see where that week 5 is coming from, and just by virtue of how our classes are scheduled within SIS and how they're categorized by different instructional modalities. So lots of cool stuff in here, lots of different things for you to peek at. You can get a sense of what do our students look like this spring compared to last, where are they coming from? Are they a new to Rio student? Do they have prior enrollment? If they're new, are they brand new to Maricopa versus did we, receive them from another Maricopa college? Lots of different comparisons by instructional modality, course offerings, et cetera. So lots of cool stuff in there. I saw a chat pop up in my view. Let me just take a peek at it. Do we have all of Maricopa College's institutional research department like Rio? If so, reports uniform across the colleges. It's a great question, Karen. So the answer is yes. Like all 10 colleges do have an IE or IR office, depending on how they branded that at their college. A lot of most of the colleges will publish content into Tableau. I'm not sure how many of the other colleges have tabular reporting in the way that we do. So, thinking about specifically around advisors, like if they've got the same types of reporting available to them on like their caseloads and things, that's going to be more of a college by college thing. We are starting to engage in a lot of strong conversation within the IE Council about creating some design standards with respect to dashboards in particular, so that it is a little bit more consistent college by college. I think many of us have organically adopted similar design principles, just starting to see how each other have been publishing content. But as of now, there's not any official standards. So you could see, some variability in terms of how things look and feel, depending on which college's content that you're looking at. For our purposes, we do have a style guide. We do try and enforce compliance to, things like color combinations and keeping things kind of branded. That way, if something was ever exported and used for a presentation, it's already kind of ready to go from that respect. We try and use the same terminology where possible. We try and keep filtering mechanisms kind of located in the similar areas in all dashboards. So they should feel similar as you're navigating between different things. Hopefully that's your experience. In terms of additional dashboards that are always kind of helpful, in my mind at least, we get a lot of questions about, how many students fit XYZ criteria in any given point in time. And so something like the students demographics dashboard is a great resource for you to answer some of those questions. So if, for instance, you needed to know, for, fall 2024, so last fall, I guess going back 2 falls, exactly how many students were enrolled in the college, how many credits did they attempt, what percentage of them were female versus male or first generation versus not. This is a great resource for that. This also gives you the ability to get down to really specific data in terms of, a specific location. So if you wanted to see something like, for dual enrollment at, Brophy in fall 2024, you could get down to that level of granularity.
Wow.
As well as, how many
hmm
students are or are not in different, kind of demographic clusters. So lots of detail in here that at face value you might not know are there, but, just by playing around a little bit, you can get down to something like that. So lots of great stuff.
That was a
And
really
then,
high percentage of students under 18.
well, for Brophy, yeah.
Not just for Brophy, but the slide before that.
Oh,
Overall,
yeah,
it
let me
was
go
just
back to
like,
it.
I think it was mid to upper 40. I
So,
I mean, that's just amazing. Oh, I'm sorry. I was looking, oh, under 18. Okay,
yeah,
28%.
which is
Got it.
which is much higher these days than it was historically. As our dual enrollment population has grown, so too has
hmm
our under 18 population.
I
So,
know.
much different story.
I've got kids that are like 10 and 11 years old. It's
Right.
it's amazing.
Yeah. Um, One thing, so as you were saying that, Karen, it, kind of reminded me of another feature that's very helpful is, let's say as an end user, you've gotten yourself down this rabbit hole of like, I want to know how students at Agua Fria High School looked in this really specific time frame, and you're like, what have I done? Now I need my data back. You can just use these features up here to kind of reset your view, and it'll reset everything back to the default state that it's in when it's published. We'll set these things up to be published in a way that should be current, if you will. And then from there, as a user, you can go in and filter to your heart's content. That doesn't affect the way that anybody else sees it. It's just your specific view. You can bookmark those types of views. So if you say, I want to, apply these filters and then save this for later, you can do that. So that way you can always come back to that and monitor a specific pattern or trend that you're most interested in for your particular population of students. So some cool features in there that, are available because we're using Tableau for some of these things as opposed to some of the other tools we've used in the past. And then the other big thing that is always utilized is around annual awards. So we've got, just a simple dashboard for folks to be able to monitor award activity. Using some of these filters, you can kind of customize what things look like. So if you just want to know for the current fiscal year, how many students have graduated to date, you can see that along with, different distributions around things like, field of interest or, the type of award, certificates versus degrees, et cetera. There's also a listing at the award level so that you can get down into the weeds of program by program, how are they performing? You can kind of filter some of that to restrict the view if you want to be able to compare different student populations. You have the ability to do that. So all that to say within Tableau is, the world is kind of your oyster in Tableau. There's lots of information. Admittedly, a lot of filtering options that can feel overwhelming, but many of them were selected with a specific idea in mind, either in response to a particular question. So like I know when we were looking at that student demographics dashboard, there were things like Tempe Promise program filters and Guild student filters, like those things have been incorporated in response to specific questions. But it gives you a lot of flexibility on your end to be able to really drill down into the data and get at what you're looking for. And that posted a comment. I think it was a question. And I think the most interesting trend right now is the growth of our out-of-state population that's been heavily fueled by our guild partnership. It's really influencing a lot of trends in a lot of ways that don't feel uh, like they're a part of Rio's narrative based on where we've been over the last, I don't know, decade or so. So with Guild, we are getting a lot of increase of older students, working adults who kind of buck the trend of students getting younger and younger as we've kind of scaled out and really grown within dual enrollment. We're having a lot more credential seeking students who are coming to the fold, students that don't have a lot of prior educational experience. So for many years, as I've been doing roadshows about different things that are true of Rio student body, we've been talking about how large the supplemental student population is. Those are students who are not declared in degree or certificate programs. We've talked about how large the students with prior education experience population was, and Guild has really upset a lot of those trends. And so we're seeing a big change in terms of the types of learner who are coming to the table, both in terms of the level of support they need, but also opens up a lot of creative options that we can use to really help understand what's going to help them be most successful, and then hopefully scale some of those practices out to the rest of the college. Um, so that's, I think, one of the most disruptive, if you will, trends that we've seen in the last couple of years, but for good reasons. And then the other thing is that, student outcomes are really chugging along. When you think about things like retention and completion outcomes, I am often the bearer of bad news and letting folks know that we're not always hitting marks where we'd like to see them in terms of comparisons to peer institutions and other things. But having said that, we are slowly seeing an uptick in things like our student term to term persistence, how well we're retaining students year over year, how many students we're able to get to complete within a specific amount of time. And so while those aren't always fun conversations and they feel very prescriptive and compliance driven, whether we like it or not, there are things that we're held accountable to. And so it's something that we, continuously are working to try and improve, and we're seeing the results of that come to light. So lots of different positive indicators that are coming out of that. Sorry, there was another question. Just leave this open. Is there a view to see which specific state students are coming from? Yes. So Michelle, if we go back to that student demographics dashboard, this is probably a good opportunity to orient you to the fact that many of the dashboards will have different views or tabs. Most of the dashboards that we publish, your ability to navigate between the tabs is just by virtue of clicking on these different containers up here so that you can navigate from one to the next. Some dashboards we've tried to experiment with more contemporary navigational functionality, like buttons to move from one page to the next. This is just so much easier and more intuitive. So most of the dashboards you'll see like this. So within this dashboard, there's a secondary tab here that's labeled as student maps. Within this, we've got some heat maps to show you where students are. So right here, we've got, within the state of Arizona specifically, kind of zip code heat map, so you can see where students are coming from. Again, lots of filtering options. So if you want to drill down into something really specific, you can get there. And then as well as that, we've got kind of the national lens so that you can see where students are coming from. These are both responsive to all these filters. So if you were to do something like only select the Guild partnership students, and this, again, is just filtered to academic year 2025, but then you can get a sense of, how many students and from which state, et cetera. So lots of cool stuff in there. Okay, so I'm gonna get us back over to the presentation so that we can move on to the next topic, just trying to be mindful of time. And so that is our business intelligence reports. So I want to take a second to talk about this so that we can all be on the same page. There's been some changes to this, and it's prompted a lot of questions and sometimes confusion, unfortunately. And so, hopefully setting the record straight a little bit, at least with folks who are here. So business intelligence reports, many of you on this call, looking at names, are very familiar with these things. They're most of the time reports that are developed with a very specific purpose in mind. So, hey, I need a list of students that meet these very specific conditions, or for advisors, we want a list of students for students that are in a particular advisor's caseload, along with details on these specific fields of interest that we're most curious about. So that's to say that a lot of these reports don't have broad applicability. You're certainly able to access a lot of them, although many of them are locked down for different security reasons or data privacy reasons. But they may not be as useful as something like the Tableau dashboards, which are really more intended for exploratory purposes or a lot of flexibility in terms of all the filtering that they give you. So if you're a user who's using some of these reports, the URL to get to them is our reporting server, which you can navigate to at reports.riosoloto.edu/browse. That'll take you to the home page. Before I click over to there and kind of point you around, I do want to just reiterate that VPN is still required when you're working remotely and trying to access these things. Back in the fall, we tried to roll out a change with IT to back that requirement out. They've still not been able to get the product that they were intending to use for that to play nice with Duo to make sure that that's all working well, and we're able to get people through without having to get tripped up in the MFA process. So for the time being, until further notice, VPN is still required to access these reports when you're working off-site. You should already have something like the Cisco security client installed on your Rio issued laptop. You get to it by entering in vpn.riosoloto.edu, and then you're able to get access to our network, which will then get you access to the reporting server. If you're using a computer, this is one of the main things that I've seen pop up. If you're using a computer that is just your personal computer, you're using, not a non-Rio issued piece of technology, you might not have a VPN client installed. And so that's something that I would just have to kind of defer you to IT on to see if they can work with you to make sure that you're all set up in the way that you need to be. If you have issues, don't hesitate to reach out to us. I just can't promise that we can resolve everything, especially if you're someone who's using your own personal technology. We might have to, kind of escalate you to IT and help get them to support you through to access. Um, However, if you're here on site locally, if you're using Rio's network, you don't have to worry about VPN. You can just navigate directly to that site. So whenever you're here, whenever you're connected to the network, whether that's VPN or not, you should be able to get access. If you can't, let us know. We'll get you sorted out, and be able to either get you or team members who can't access into the system. So let's go ahead and navigate over there together. Of course, that's a fun error message to get when you're clicking on things. We'll just go from the site. And this is the home page. It should look very similar to you, depending on your level of access. As you might imagine, I've got access to all the folders that are in the server. Depending on your role and how we've got everything set up, you might not see this entire list. There's a lot of flexibility that you have. Yeah, thank you. There's a lot of flexibility that you have as an end user, to be able to customize how this looks and feels. So if you're not someone who likes this tiled view and you want a list view, you can kind of do that for yourself. As in with Tableau, everything in here is kind of favoritable. I'm logged in as my non-admin account right now, so let's just pick something. If you were to come in here, and you wanted a general enrollment report on student LDA, you can use the little star icons to favorite things. And then when you come to your favorites menu, you'll just see the list of curated content that you've selected. The nice thing about this environment is that we can set up subscriptions for you. So if you would like to receive a daily or weekly or monthly email of one of these reports with certain conditions that you specified, we can do that. So if there's something that you're using and you're going and running it every day and you're like, hey, it would just be much easier if this were delivered to my inbox, then just let us know. We can take care of that for you. Let me go back just a second. Okay. And then once you're in a report, there's a lot of functionality that is nice in this platform as opposed to Tableau because it does allow for a lot more intuitive interface with respect to exporting data, different things like that. I don't want to run something knowing that student IDs might pop up because I'm recording this and I don't want to create a FERPA violation. But essentially, if you run a report and it's got something like a list of students that you need to reach out to, there's a lot of very easy, intuitive navigation because it's a Microsoft product. It's going to look and feel just like it does when you're working in Word or Excel or something, where you can quickly export things into an Excel file, into a CSV, into a PDF, whatever you might need to empower the work that you're doing. So many of you, if you're using these things, you're probably already familiar with the reports themselves, but there's probably some extended functionality that you might not be taking full advantage of, like exporting features or subscriptions and things. And so if you want to explore that together, if you think that there's a little bit more value you can gain out of this, just let us know. We're happy to have those conversations. Other than that, I just wanted to open up the floor to questions. I know that we covered a lot of content kind of quickly. I was trying to be mindful of the timing that Annette reminded me of there, but happy to hang out for anybody who wants to take a little bit more time and ask really specific questions or get into the weeds of anything in particular. If you're just curious about something, happy to do that. Otherwise, I appreciate everybody for attending. Hopefully this was a good reorientation into all of these resources. If you haven't been in there recently and you were curious about where to find stuff, hopefully this is a good reminder for you. So yeah, thank you so much. Appreciate it and happy to hang out if anyone has any questions.
Zach, if I do have questions or have certain requests for the general reports one, not the Tableau, where testing has their information, who do I meet up with? Whom do I contact?
Yeah, so Diana, I think this might have happened like right before you hopped on. So
Okay.
first of all, I'll say don't ever hesitate to just reach out to me or someone on my team, and if nothing else, we can have a conversation and figure out what next steps look like. For testing specifically,
Yeah.
if you needed something like a new report created, there is a menu in the college's service desk application that's just called reports or dashboards. You can click on that. It's a
Mm-hmm.
ticket that'll come directly to me, and then we'll get it assigned out accordingly. If it's something about accessing or configuring something within something like Test Tracker, then we
Mm-hmm.
can always have a conversation too with Long and team and figure out how to make sure that that's all working as you're intending it to.
Okay. Yeah, I think it's just the reports have changed over time, so we don't
Mhm.
see what we used to see. So they've just kind of modified. So I would like to get the reports kind of modified within that. I don't know if I'm explaining it correctly, but I'll submit the help desk and then go from there. I just want to kind
Why
of
don't you
get
just follow
started.
up and shoot me an email and then we can talk about that together.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Will you share these slides?
Yeah, I can share these slides for
Okay.
sure. Great question. All right. Well, as much as I appreciate everybody and welcome any additional questions that you all have, I also don't want you to feel obligated to just keep hanging out here with me. I know many folks are going to start making their ways over to the conference center. So we'll just go ahead and call it, reiterate my deep appreciation for you all joining today. Hope your 2026 is off to a great start so far. And we'll catch you in February. Thanks,
All
everybody.
right. Thank
Thanks.
you, Zach.
Bye.